Right, we're back again, page 8, the first chapter of Gróga Cloch. This is the story of Dara and his life growing up as a boy in Connemara. So we were talking about the muir and the hat that was on him and how it made him into a Dinna Úsl, or a high class fellow. And Hanti Dara. So now Dara is talking about the muir. This is the fellow that's in charge of the estates where there's fishing going on and hunting and all sorts of wildlife. Hanti, or ampli, amplach, so desiring very much so, Macdara was himself, ave, to be in a muir. He wants to be a muir himself. Vi sail, life, an vra egan muir. He has a life very, very nice at the muir, such as the life of the muir. Dar lesh, according to Macdara, eg dull hard going over, dull over hard lesh na hiskeri, with the fisherman. A cur quillina, and some of the things that the muir does is he puts quillina, or flies, a norhe. So doru is a cord. So on their na uru dore, on their cords for them, doi. Eg deshu, fixing them up and dressing them up. Eg feshtu, their slats, a slat. Chulla Yolis, all Yolis was at the muir. He's very knowledgeable. Anyim Chull, he knows the name on all Cuyoge Ege at the muir. Egan muir. Yolis more, great information. Eran Awenege, he understands greatly about the Awen, which is the river. Na Paul Bradon, the holes where Bradon or Seminar Abar, that were or would be best, Abar. Na Paul, that's the holes, Nakrau Tada, not were anything in them, Ak Askani. So Powls with Bradon and Powls with nothing but eels. Nur Nakrau Kurum na Iskri air, when he wasn't giving Kurum to the fishermen, the Kurumi Jasa, there was nice responsibilities at him also. So the Mir wasn't simply a waiter to the fisherman, he also had enjoyable kurumi to take care of. Chola yorumi chorum er ba chorum jase. In fact, every kurum, every responsibility at him was a nice jas responsibility kurum that he had. Ba was he. Be a hug ara, he would pay attention, for example, or put notice, ara, hug, bring notice, donna hennacha fa. So one of his responsibility was for the managing the hennacha, the birds, fa of the fja, or the quill, so the forest fa birds, donna patrishki, which are the peasants, the pheasants, patrishki, that's one of his responsibilities, to manage those. Kuni she shoni, so he would keep kuni, him, the muir, foxes, agus dina wahu, and people from them, from the foxes. He'd keep the people away from the foxes, or the foxes away from the people. Hug she ara, he brought notice, ara, dun na shunli, freshen ik kinaldina wahu, and he'd also help the foxes avoid the people. Hogshe ara, yeah. So be a hug ara, it was him, be a hug ara, do na henle free. So freach is a heather, so there's heathery birds as well that were part of his responsibilities. On Schlieve. Schlieve is the mountain, so there's these birds, ainle, heathery of the mountain, Schlieve. Ekinol fanog agus dine wahu. So fanog is a type of carog or lich or prechan. So it's a crow. So he'd keep the crows and dini away from those heathery birds as well. Be'e alavi, so his guns, the prechan or the fanog, the crows, and the snagana brake. So these are sort of speckled crows. Nur a dairiader rolinwer. So Irie, they would rise, they other Iriader. So when they would rise too leanwer, too numerously, so iver lean agus so number too numerously agus rohantasach and too boldly, too concentratedly hantasa rohantasach. So when these crows would rise to Prechan, Snigana, Fanog, he would shoot them. Bay a Vari na Kinini, and he would kill Vari Nur when was iver lean iver number too great raw war aku amongst these crows. He killed the Kanini. So he was in charge of culling the crows and the rabbits. The gunna all in Egan Muir, and he had a lovely gun. Be'an Muir, this commodity in charge of the estates, put trapina or gashti more, a big one, San Owen, Iginne Madri Ishke. He was also going up against the Madri is dogs, Ishke is water. These are otters, the water dogs. Agus Bay or Dober Ku is another word for it. Bay Achil Nadricha. So Quil is to snip the magerly on a horse, for example. You quille or you keep so that's like to cut back or cull. So cull the nadrucha fuilan. So the fuilan are the seagulls, and they're nadrucha, and it was his responsibility also to keep down the fuilan population. And in the lach, in the lake, that for their ivukui, and he was being put ba a gur gudi na bielana. These are restaurants bielana ba galanta satir. So he was managing these eggs and the restaurants and the fuilon, the kelna, arena clamper. It was these fuilon by Iad na fuilon, these same fuilon that were making clamper or fochrum agus kalon. So clamper agus kalon is noise. Vi she rate, it was said, vi she rate said, nar gillan krakadorach sha charbe na fuilan, nar kurshe stiach a nivrachi, are, nor a cuide nad gurrug an kark oi nu. So he's talking about the nadrachi agus na ivrachi na fuilan agus the nature of these birds. Get vach Dara as a varana. So marana is sween of doin, so that's deep thought. So get is like giddy up or prab or jump out of. Macdara jumped out of his deep thought, marana. Vi antiskere e coriacht. This is wrestling, coriacht. The fisherman was wrestling le brack with a trout. This iskere, eg ligin lesh amanta, and he'd let with it sometimes. Let, he'd give slack. Howring she, he'd pull agus hochra she, and he would scroll. So if you're tochrish, your phone, your guchan, you're scrolling, that's a word for it. Agus squeal she, and he would release it again. So he's describing the pull and the rolling of the cord of the fisherman's fishing pole. Near squealshe, he would not release enough, and he would release. He would not release a little a quantity, and he would pull, and so he's describing this pulling and releasing activity of the fishing pole. Brishe antishke urente. So the water would break sometimes urente nur a lame on brack. Lame is get or jump. the trout, brack. Ba brack, on war, very big. A V on, it was a very big one. This one that was jumping. It was miltach more, so it was terribly big. Miltach more big. Vi sula vachtare eg bora in the kligen. Eg bora is to be, how would you say, to be swelling, growing, false, eg dolle maids, in his head. So he's very via Cree Egluin, his heart Cree was uh, actively engaged in activity. So luing, it's like movement and really jumping and excited. So he's very excited by this big trout that has been caught by the Iskara. He's watching and spying on this whole thing. Hanig she, he came, Anuis, that is down, the Hiachan, from his seat, his Siachan, in the cran, in the tree, Achniyaki she balyach, but he did not go, Jackie she Macdara, exactly. He didn't go exactly Balyach to Gudi on Bruch, the side of the river. Ni yarna she en fochrum. He didn't make any fochrum. We had the other words for fochrum. That's clamper, agus kalon, agus fochrum are noise. Snag no canad. So that's like when you have a tocht or a snag or a canad, id the scornach, id the skadamon, ni yernashe. So he didn't make any noise, not even that type of noise that would get caught in your throat. Vishe ri hawachtach nach nienach. And it wasn't just tawachtach, it was ri hawachtach that he wouldn't make ni nienach, this snag or canad in his skadamon, in his scornach. Be'esha on time. This was the time. Har am, above or over time or be over. This was the time of any time. This mihid, the perfect time. Leve in a host, to be in his quietude. Host. Chulashe glor on weir. He heard the voice of the hula, heard of the muir, the fellow watching the lands. We described him earlier. Vi an muir eg imrev. Imrev is from the word imram, which is an old genre of Irish literature, where sailors would go off on sailing adventures, the imram, and it remains in the Irish language as the word for rowing. So imrav, shees an awen. He went rowing down the river in his maud, in his bod. And Muir did this. And there's an angach, that's a net, ervar feke fade savide ege, and he has this angach in his with his boat. On kinal kena, the same angi or angach, the same kind kinal net that was a v a grish in the belt of his back, of the fisherman's back, egan iskere, the fisherman, ach goroshe e klishe, but he was failing on it to use, that he was failing to use. So this is the angach at the muir in his bod that the iskere had also, but he did not use it. Klishach er on iskere to use this net, but the muir was using the net. Kappa on one caught Kapu and Bradon, the salmon. So the salmon was caught. The luchar, this is great excitement, great value, erchuliyene. So there's great bigu or luchar at everyone. The antiskara, the fisherman, and the muir were gaira. They were a gaira, just laughing. The makdara in a hasif, he was standing, shasiv, fort, at the port of the river, hula, a gliskernach, and his sula, his eyes, a gliskernach, a glunru, or a drihlu. They were sparkly, and there was a pishlin, glinder, a sort of glimmering bit of spittle or shela at the kunya, at the corner of his mouth, of Macdara's mouth. Rowie an muir. So the rowie is imrav, so he's rowing. An muir is doing the rowing up on Awen, suas on Awen, agus hánig, and came idir Sagolin, and he came into the land of the little river, Golin, Ascor, so that's Shruhan or Golin, Ascor before, in front of Antakin Bod. So that's the end of that page. So that's the story there of Macdara and the Muir and him spying on the fisherman as the steward of the lands and the fisherman catch a Bradon. We continue on with this book. It's so rich with vocabulary. I'll throw up a page at a time, and anyone with an interest of a glauert lin in Nailge, trí gailge leabhar clasachacha in Nailge, béimid ag léamh go minic trínan seachtaine ar a seachta clóg Zoom le chéile ar an si Vigilín Urban Gaeltacht. Gur míle maithagí, slán.